The first step is to ensure the firearm is safe. Check that there are no rounds in the chamber and remove the magazine to confirm the gun is completely empty. Magazine, the container for ammunition, usually a long rectangular box. The magazine must be removed before proceeding to avoid any accidental discharge. Assembly pin, a pin that secures various components of the firearm. It is usually located on the underside of the firearm and must be removed to disassemble other parts. Magazine components. Internal parts of the magazine, such as the follower, magazine spring, and base plate, which help feed rounds into the firearm. Upper receiver, the upper portion of the firearm's frame that houses the barrel and other components. The upper receiver contains the main firing mechanism, magazine catch axis, a pivot or axis that allows the magazine catch to function. Removing this enables the magazine catch to be detached. Magazine catch assembly, a locking mechanism that holds the magazine in place when the firearm is in use. Removing this gives access to internal parts. Sear axis, the axis that connects the sear, a component of the firing mechanism, to the trigger mechanism. Removing this allows disassembly of the sear assembly. Sear assembly, a component that regulates the release of the striker or hammer to fire the round. The sear assembly is vital to the firing mechanism. Trigger axis, a pivot or axis that connects the trigger to other parts. Removing it allows the trigger to be detached. Sear retainer, a retainer that keeps the sear assembly in place. It must be removed to disassemble the sear. Trigger components includes the trigger itself and springs or connectors involved in the firing mechanism. These components activate the firing system. Operation handle, the handle used to pull the bolt back for chambering a round or clearing the firearm. Removing it gives access to the bolt. Bolt, the main moving component of the firing mechanism that cycles rounds into the chamber and ejects spent casings. Extractor assembly, a component that removes spent casings from the chamber after a round is fired. Buffer, a part that absorbs recoil energy to reduce stress on other firearm components. Buffer plate, a protective plate that holds the buffer in place. Firing assembly, the assembly responsible for igniting the ammunition, typically involving the striker or hammer and firing pin. Recoil spring, a spring that returns the bolt to its original position after a round is fired. Recoil spring guide, a rod that guides the recoil spring to keep it aligned as the bolt moves. Striker spring, a spring that provides the force to propel the striker or firing pin to strike the primer of the round. Striker spring guide, a guide for the striker spring to keep it properly positioned during operation.